I think that we were meant to speak today instead of yesterday, because last night we were watching Substance with Demi Moore. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm. Is it good?
It is good because it makes you think.
Okay.
But it's very different and out there, and like I'm not going to say anymore.
Okay.
But basically, it's a lot around ideas that we have, specifically women and beauty and aging. And
Okay.
I know we're going to talk about photography. And I know a lot of that has to do with like
Image.
seeing yourself and self-love. And it was just, was crazy to see examples of how we beat ourselves up because we don't look like what outside of us thinks we should look like. Even people that, you might look at him, you might look at them and say, that person is gorgeous. Like, what is wrong with them? Like, why do they see themselves as anything other than that? But it's really the internal work and removing the pieces that maybe have made their way and poisoned our view of ourselves so that we can embrace, this vessel that is ours and see it as something that's worth loving.
Yes. And so that's what this is about. But that does tie into exactly what I do. I think everything especially with the day and age that we're in with Instagram and social media. I mean, before we had that, this was an issue, and now I think it's just exasperated immensely because there is constantly cameras in the face. There's constantly this push to be ideal, I guess, if I say that in quotes, because what is ideal? It's actually something I think through photography I've been discovering throughout my career the last 20 years of what is the ideal beauty? What does beauty mean? What does it mean to be beautiful? And I think it's different in every space that we go into. If you start traveling the world, there's different ways in which people exemplify beauty. And like what you're saying, especially here in the Americas, I think there's this constant reminder of not to age, like stay young, you see younger and younger girls getting Botox. Like I know 25-year-olds who are putting stuff in their face, and it's like, you haven't even fully, like your face, I don't even know if it's fully developed yet. But wrinkles is not something that's happening right now for sure. I can tell you that. But I do think that there's a little bit of, with that, there are women who are now embracing the gray and starting to embrace aging in a different way. So I think we have two sides to this story, or not this story, but this, our societal push to be something, and I think it always comes back to, like you were describing, what is the internal self? What's the relationship with myself? And if we're lacking that, that's where outside can affect us, the outside world. And it's, I mean, where do you want to go? I can talk about this subject like all day.
Oh, we're going to get into it. I can tell. So I wanted to tell you that there's a retreat facilitator that I interviewed here. Her name is Chelsea. She does retreats for women in Tulum, and she was telling me that part of the retreat is a naked photo shoot. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's the first I had ever heard about that. But just, like you said, all over the world, beauty is seen as, it can be different things to different people. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so I want to know, tell me about how the work you do helps people to behold themselves with love.
Okay. I I have done those nude photo shoots that you describe. I think that's the ultimate space and vulnerability, especially with soulography. I've done full retreats where basically we're nude the whole time.
Wow.
Been wild. Yeah. And photography is established in there. But with the work that I do, I think it's originally I started out in fine art, specializing in nudes. And then
Oh,
that
wow.
shifted. Yeah. Yeah. And then that shifted later into about probably, I would say 10 years ago. It was when it shifted into boudoir, and the boudoir movement kind of came in, where it is about embodiment and it was about feeling good in your body. Where I started to have I guess I was feeling awkward in the fact that we're creating these beautiful images. Women are still asking me to Photoshop them. They're asking me to paint them, like let's take out the wrinkles or take out my birthmark or take out to be paint. I call it painting because essentially you're painting the skin to be as clear as possible, or we're taking out, bringing the hips down or bringing the stomach down. And then at the end of the day, we're giving these images to somebody. So still, it's not for ourselves. It's for the purpose of sexualizing ourselves, which is great. And there is sensuality in that. But I was coming to within self of I don't fully want to do this anymore. It's not real. And and though it's embracing and liberating to do this work and to be photographed in this way, I wanted more out of it, of what happens when we don't do these things, when we don't start covering the skin, when we don't hide the little chub on our hips, or different things like that. And what happens when we don't pose to hide these things or to look a certain way. So we're still covering up and we're still doing things that's not an authenticity. However,
Yeah.
it's still liberating. So there was this place in which I'm like, okay, what's happening here? How can I explore this? And at the same time, my spiritual side and my practices in shamanism and energy was starting to expand. And I was keeping it, I was still, I guess you would say, in the spiritual closet, and you're you don't let everyone know what you're doing at the altar over there. Let me hide it. And the more I was exploring in that, I was realizing that what I was really wanting within photography and what I was doing in the spiritual aspects were the same thing. And what happens if we combine these worlds together? And that's when soulography came about and formed. And so what I did was starting, what happens if we photo shoot without makeup? What happens if we, yes, we start in dresses or different things, but what happens when we minimize that and it becomes just truly about the rawness of who we are? And when that started happening, just different things began unraveling. I began doing meditations while you're being photographed. I began grounding people into the space, and actually starting with eyes closed. That's an odd concept to start being photographed without seeing, right? But at the end of the day, I think with photography, the challenge, or not challenge, but at the end of the day, what I love about the work that I'm getting to do is that we're opening space for women to see themselves and witness themselves be seen by themselves. So it's a completely different experience. One, to have a camera in front of you, and then to do that without clothes, or to do that without makeup, or different things. But it can be, what I've found is it's no session is ever the same, and we don't start out the same. Things are, oh, can you hear that?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Is the construction still happening?
They're not supposed to be going. I think they forgot. If it continues, I'll take care of it. But I apologize.
This is cool. Real life. Hashtag real life.
Right. But so no session is ever really the same, even though we may bring in different things. But what I found is also, while we're being seen and while we're doing photographs, people are also exploring sound. They're exploring the relationship with their body. They're exploring where blocks are within the body. Am I at war with certain parts of myself? and being able
Yeah.
to completely just start to realize what those are through the photographic process.
Ooh, I love that. Do
Well,
you like, I was just imagining, like, let's say there's somebody doesn't like their shoulder, and you notice them trying to hide their shoulder or whatever. And
uh-huh.
do you stop to say, like, what's going on there? Like, do you want to
Well,
share about what's happening?
yes, I think what would happen in that case is I would probably figure out a way to guide it into like close the eyes and like stop and like what's going on here and let's have a dialogue with the body, but in a guided meditation type of way. So where it's like they
Yeah.
don't even know that we're having this dialogue and it's becoming an internal space with the self. And then it's like, can we honor this part of the shoulder? Like, what is this about? Like, can I come to a space of acceptance with it? I don't have to love it, but can I be okay with it?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I would probably do some things posing, like I say posing, but leaning into poses, where we're naturally starting to photograph that area on purpose, whether they're conscious of it or not, but more guiding into the situation of it.
Yeah.
That leads
And I'd
naturally.
imagine it's like if you have multiple sessions in your soulography, let's say, you can
Mhm.
see the evolution, the progression of like maybe this shoot, you were kind of like going through this emotion of accepting, and
Yes,
then how it evolves into now you've fully embraced it.
exactly. Yes. And so there's shoots where we start with and the embodiment sessions, like what we're describing here is like it's raw. There's no makeup. We're usually in nature. We're grounding in. We're exploring the body, and then later doing something that's more of a celebration, where it's like, okay, are we using makeup to anoint versus cover up? Are we using clothing to hide, or are we using it because it feels really good to be in silk and I like silk?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I want to enhance the sultriness of being in that, and what is my sacred sexuality in that. So it's taking almost like boudoir but flipping it sideways, and it's becoming, yeah, now I'm in the full embodiment of being okay with this internal landscape and the external.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using it in
That
celebration.
sounds amazing. And I love how silk feels. It's just
Right?
like I just want to
It's like so,
swim in it.
yeah, right. I always bring in silk. I think it's me that likes silk. I don't know about my clients, but yeah.
I like it a lot. You know, I don't know when it started, but the maybe it was the skincare industry that kind of started the no makeup thing to
Uh-huh.
showcase creams and things like that. And I'm sure they photoshopped pieces of the face. But I remember the first time I saw uh somebody like with red hair, because I grew up in Miami, and back
Okay.
then it was just, surrounded by everybody that was Latin. My
Uh-huh.
mom's family is Cuban,
Okay.
so I'm the only redhead in the,
Wow.
the
Okay.
family. And so I struggled with, not
Yeah.
looking like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I for a long time, I didn't like it. I wished to have looked differently.
Uh-huh.
And there were other things, there were other things that were said to me that as a kid, you piece together things that people don't realize you're piecing together. And
Right.
then you're like, oh my God, well, if that's true, I must be ugly. And
Uh-huh.
then you carry that. So anyway, I
Uh-huh.
see this redhead with no makeup, and I see that her eyebrow, like the color of her eyebrows and the color of her eyelashes and the freckles on her
Uh-huh.
eyelids. And I'm just like, wow, that is so beautiful.
Uh-huh.
You know, kind of like you would look at it like an animal in nature
Uh-huh.
and be like, oh my God, what a beautiful being, just embracing the natural state of what it is.
Uh-huh. The rawness.
Yeah. And
Uh-huh.
I think there's so much beauty to when you can see someone's natural color of their
Uh-huh.
eyelashes or their eyebrows, or when you're zooming in to see that detail of yourself, and you can fall in love with those things,
Uh-huh.
or like the little hairs on your face.
Yep. Exactly. I did a whole project, probably, I don't know how many years ago now, all around freckles, people with freckles. Yeah, me too. I'm obsessed.
And people try to get rid of their freckles.
I
I'm like,
know.
what? What are you doing?
You have constellations all over you. Yeah, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, it's exact, and the thing is too, like what you're describing of how we piece together these things from childhood or things that are being said. Um, that like that goes all the way into somatics too, of like the body remembers everything we've ever been through, whether we remember it or not. So like things that somebody said when you were a kid or when you were little could be the very thing that has is now and stuck in the body that's causing blocks around why you're afraid to show up in the world, or speak your voice in big rooms, or just different things like that. um, and so with soulography too, we're also doing a lot of somatic work within the body. So movements that are allowing things like this to come up, and we can move them out, not just through through speaking, but through moving, because the
I
body
love that.
holds so much.
And
Yeah.
what a powerful capture that must
Yeah.
be too, because I'm like imagining if someone's going through something and you're capturing like their breathing or they're opening their arms, it's almost like it's not a pose, it's a pose that we often
We go after.
want to, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's more about it's I think of it as like the camera just becomes a tool to which we can see. So it's not even about the camera anymore. It's about what's happening within self. And then the camera just happens to be there. So almost like how a chef needs a pot to boil water. We need the camera as part of the a tool versus the being it about that. So it's
Yeah.
yes, it's a photo shoot, but I don't even really call them photo shoots anymore, because it's not what we think of a photo shoot. You know, it's
I
more of
love soulography because it's you're capturing the soul coming
exactly.
out.
Yeah, exactly. And however that is. I mean, I've had women in rivers exploring sound, screaming at the top of their lungs or singing or doing, you know what I mean? It's like that's a photo shoot, like yeah, because it's more we're in a somatic healing session at that point. But sound becomes a huge part of it as well, because most women are walking around the world keeping things in and not speaking up, and sound is so important that our voice, it's like our medicine. So to activate that during a shoot as well is pretty potent too. So
Mhm. And how did you get into retreats?
um I think I kind of just I don't know. I do know, but at some point someone suggested, why aren't you photographing retreats? And I was like, I didn't know that's a thing. And then I found somebody and I said, I want to be a part of your retreat. And they were like, okay. And then I just kind of went from there, and that now been a part, and I think I'm on like 25 retreats in the last like 3 to 4 years.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That I've brought soulography to, or that I've co-created or created myself. Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, it kind of just once I went to one, I was like, I kind of got addicted to it and was like, hey, I want to be in these spaces. Things are happening in these spaces. Brilliant
Yeah.
things are happening in these spaces.
And
So
the photos look amazing on your
thank
website.
you.
I love that you create these different sections
Mm.
featuring each of the retreats and the look and feel. I'm sure it's like a combination of the space, what's happening in the space at that moment,
Mhm.
the how you're capturing it, the filters you're using, but it just looks so sacred. It doesn't look like, okay, everybody, let's get in and take a
Right. Yeah. I think that's also too because I I have it I've been obsessed with portraits since I started photography at 17. Like I'm also obsessed with the the figure and what the conceptualization of like what womanhood is. What is that? What is it? Because it's different for every person. Yes, we're all sisters, and yes, we share a sisterhood, but you're not going to meet one person that is exactly the same. I find it very fascinating. It's also like psychology, probably. But in these spaces, I get deep in it with the women. So I'm not on the outside. I'm in line with you, bawling my eyes out while I just happen to have a camera in your face. But I
yeah.
think it tends to disappear because it's almost like an extension of me. So it's no longer like I'm documenting, yes, but I'm creating with you. Like we're in the space together. So if you're in a moment of tears or me getting it in so close, is because I've established a relationship with these women as well that is in combination with photography, but also with who I am. I'm also sharing, I'm also crying, I'm also in the depths with you. So it's there's no separation when it comes to the photography aspect of it. Whether that's documenting a retreat that I'm not leading or being in it as like just soulography as private sessions. So,
And you also lead retreats?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
What kind of retreats?
Yeah. Well, last year, in June, I did something called The Untamed Woman. And this one was all about duality. So it was about how do we honor the dark and find the light. So really breaking it down and becoming unhinged in the wildness of our shadows. And then finding lightness through that. Like how do we stand in duality with our dark and our light sides? And so that was we were in the desert. It was pretty wild, but great as well. And that's one. I've done a lot of self-love ones. Next year, getting ready to do some things in Guatemala. I've been studying with the midwives, the 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓s, out in 𝗕𝗨𝗡𝗘𝗧𝗏. And I'll be taking some women out there for womb work and different areas within the sacredness of the womb, because that's another portal of which I am deeply fascinated with the body and the womb. Yeah.
Wow, Guatemala is a hot spot. I'm hearing lots of people talk about it lately.
Yeah, I have too. I think the land there is potent and the culture is in 𝗕𝗨𝗡𝗧𝗏. Have you been?
No.
Oh, it's a potent land, and I think it's the culture is beautiful, and there's something there that is pretty sacred and magic within the way that they live and the waters and just everything about it. I'm very drawn to the Mayan ways.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's Mayan culture back there.
Yeah.
The ancient.
Ancient. And yeah, and it's fascinating too because the 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓s are they're kind of frowned upon out there right now. And the work that they're doing, it's kind of considered what I've heard people say, well, why wouldn't you just go to a doctor? But what I have found is that these women are like human x-rays. They know so much about the body and so much about energy work because they're also doing energy, and they're like, yes, they're delivering babies and they're doing aftercare, but they're also the town's like shaman, kind of like the medicine woman that they go to for any type of illness or anything. But the womb work that they're doing out there, the Mayan womb massage, abdominal massage, is pretty fascinating as well.
Wow.
And what they're healing with women's like endometriosis, PCOS, all kinds of things. It's wild, the work they're doing out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We lived in Mérida for 5 years, so we didn't really get that close into the ancient Mayan culture like we wanted to. We learned some, so I can, speak a few words. But I wish we would have been able to connect more. I remember when we first came over from Miami my husband is from Mexico.
Oh, okay.
But like in 2017 on the plane moving to Mexico, we met this man who was telling us that he had this issue with his blood and his heart, and that previously he would not have been able to get on a flight because his blood pressure would just go up, and basically he could risk dying. And he went to this medicine man in Yucatan who lives in a cave or something to that effect. And the guy just fixed him right up. So I was at that moment, I was like, okay, we are finding this dude. We're going to go find this guy. And that sounds like, something very similar. Or just, And a lot of times, doctors, especially now, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people misdiagnosed or
Mm-hmm.
just think, even to with my own things. And
Yeah,
it's just it's like, let people find other ways if they want to, because
exactly.
really,
Because at the end of the day, you know, yeah, I agree. And it's ancient wisdom. I think is just it's. I don't really have words. It's potent. And I know we need like modern medicine, but I do believe that like the combo of the two is what's really needed.
I agree. I
Um,
believe that.
yeah. Um,
So do you focus mostly, what draws you to work with women? Do you also work with men or just with
I
women?
do actually. I've been starting to work with men, but not so much in the with the photography aspect. I've photographed men. They do come, but not as. I mean, when you see my work, I don't think there's as many men lining up to jump in water and explore their insides. However,
Maybe there are.
there are, and that's well. I'm working in with like my the as the I'm finding a lot more men starting to show up in my world in the aspects of mentorship and teaching spirituality and self love and embodiment and shadow work. Doing a lot of work with men in inner child work and bringing themselves back home to self in that way. So maybe photography will start to come in that realm. But the vulnerability, I think, and there's so much I think that men are holding on to in a space that vulnerability is often frowned upon in our society. But I think there's a space happening where men are starting to acknowledge that mental health is a real thing, and it's part of body, mind, and spirit. And I think that more and more men are opening up to these spaces to heal and be vulnerable and be raw. Especially yeah, I also am a breathwork practitioner, and that's really where I'm seeing it is these men in breath just allowing themselves to completely unfold, and it's really cool to see. Um, but I'll call in some men for embodiment sessions. I think that would be wild to
Yeah.
really get
I
into.
think I would love to see that too, because, I don't know if you've heard this too, but you often hear like, oh, just women are so beautiful. Women, it's just
Mhm.
that women are so beautiful. And we don't really hear that in the context of men. Like, oh, men
Right?
are so beautiful. Maybe if you're into men, like you're
Yeah.
attracted to men, you may say something like that. But seeing the kind of photos that you produce, that you
Uh-huh.
create, and being able to capture that beautiful, vulnerable, feminine aspect that we all have within
Uh-huh.
us,
Yeah.
I think would be something really,
I
really
do.
beautiful.
I do too. Now that you're like speaking it, I'm seeing it in my mind, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
like let's get on it. Like let's bring this in. I'm gonna
I think you should.
go find some men. Because I am seeing like what you're saying. I'm like, yeah, that rawness would be really exciting to see on film.
Yeah, like bringing it back to the David, but
Mhm.
the resurrecting that idea in a more sacred type of
Exactly, like
space.
a sacred space. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I'm gonna work on that. That's like going on a to not to do list, but like things that we're calling in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you share a really transformative moment that you've
Uh-huh.
seen as a result of someone looking at the work that you've done, capturing their soul?
Mm-hmm. I have two that really come to mind as we're speaking. One, I had a sister out here who went through some pretty well, she almost died. She spent a long time in induced coma, and she almost lost her life. And when she came out, she was very frail. She had the scars from, having things, I forget what it's called that goes into your neck. And then some scars from surgeries and stuff in her body. And she was very frail. Her hair was falling out. And she came to me and said, I want you to document this in a way that so I can remember this, but also I'm alive and I want to I want to document this. And so we went out into some land that was sacred to her, and I photographed her nude in the dirt, as if it it was very raw, and almost as if we were giving a funeral to her past life, and photographing that and bringing breath into that and communing with the land. And after what we had, and I focused a lot on her scars and a lot on her hair, because her hair was like her thing. And she had almost none. And so the photos after, when we gave them to her, she ended up posting them online, and I think she had a bigger reaction to what people were seeing of her, and she was like, this is what I look like. I think it became more real than looking in a mirror to her when she got them. But then the response of what people were saying about how beautiful and how brave it was to be that vulnerable, to allow yourself to be seen in almost death, you know? I think that was pretty potent for her, in the fact that there was a lot there. I don't know. I mean, I can only imagine the mental, I guess, fortitude and just the insides of what was going on when you're in the hospital, you almost pass away, and then you come out and have to start your life over again in a new way. So yeah, that was one of my pretty potent ones, just that that whole process of photographing that, especially because I know her so well. That in itself was a little different than a normal photo shoot. And then the other one that sticks out, I was photographing a retreat in Shasta, and when we first started, one of the girls there, one of the women, she was younger, and she had expressed that her sound and speaking was of not her strongest suit, and it was scary to like speak up in front of people, and to sing was something that not even to think about. And we had just done like an embodiment session of movement, and all the girls were in the river, and I pulled her aside and I said, can I photograph you in this water over here? And she said yes. And then we just went into a full session, and it's one that you can see on my Instagram, and I'm pretty sure it's in my it's in my homepage, like one of the photos. It's her sessions in a lot of spaces. But I guided her, and she just ended up having a full transmutation in exploring her sound with water and body, and almost completely, like, I'm pretty sure the whole thing was filmed with her eyes closed, and exploring sound and singing, exploring sound through the womb, and using water to like cleanse in this river. And after we both just looked at each other like, whoa. And and I have an image of the end where she's just arms up in complete bliss, because of what she just went through. It was pretty opening of not just her vocals, but to herself. And then when she received those, she said, she was like, is that me? And I'm like, dude, that's you. Like, that's hella you. So California of me to say that. But and then after that day, even, she was speaking up more. She was singing when people were singing songs in group space, and it was pretty cool to see what happened after that. I don't think she'll ever be the same after that, especially with her voice. And so those are two that stick out the most, of like, what did we do? Where did we go? We portaled.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I can feel like I wasn't there, but my hair was standing up, and I was feeling into everything you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I imagine you also have to, I mean, it takes experience and practice to be able to capture people in a way that evokes an emotion that they would say that to you, like, wow, is that me? Because I've been photographed before, and I'm like, oh my God, that this person does not see me. I don't know what they're looking at, but they're not seeing me.
Yes, I know what you mean. I think I've been doing this for, well, the photography landed in my lap, and I was originally in high school I was going to be an architectural designer. I was going to be like make houses. And I'd been
Wow.
through everything like from seventh grade all the way until like junior, senior year. I was in AutoCAD, all of the design programs. Like my whole first part of the day for school was in AutoCAD and designing houses. And my senior year, they accidentally gave me a photo class. I say accidentally in quotes, because the universe knows what it's doing. But accidentally gave me a photo class, and I waited long enough to where I couldn't get out of it to stay in it, because I fell in love with what was happening. And we were working in film then. Photoshop, I think, had just come out, and we were just learning Photoshop then. But I fell in love with the darkroom, and I fell in love with film, and I fell in love with being able to see and communicate through sight, because I didn't speak a lot when I was younger. I too was one of those people that when I spoke, my voice trembled a lot, and I didn't like to talk. So photography became a way of language to me. I could see and show the world what I was feeling, or show the world what I was seeing. And then portraits just became fascinating, because the way that the light hits a face is different in every aspect I mean, I don't know how to explain it, and meaning like light is just it's a fun form to play with, especially on a human body, because it forms differently. And then I found communicating with people in that way, where it's like when you're photographing people, for me in the beginning, I was often silent. And so it was just showing people what I saw. And I think that has taken over throughout my years of photographing, where it really is a language for me. So it's the ability to see, I think, is what really, like, you can learn all these things about the photographic process, and you can learn apertures and different things like that. But I think really taking a moment to see people is an art form in itself. And I think that's something I've always been attracted to, but have learned through 20 years of being behind a lens and how to communicate in silence, or not. But I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, you did.
Okay. Yeah.
That was a beautiful answer.
Thank you. Yeah, it was interesting a few years ago. You know that moment in sleep, I call it's like that moment between sleep and awake, where you're in like I call it like the highest vibration of channeling sometimes, where you just get these downloads, but you're not all the way asleep, but you're not all the way awake. I had this realization in that space, that it came through that that what I've always been attracted to is light. So there's light in photography, but each of us is light. So it's like I'm a light seeker at the end of the day. And it really has nothing to do with photography, even though I love it. What I love is seeking light. And so I think that's also, when you ask, like, how do you see people? I think that's what I see. I have the capability of seeing people in the truth of who they are. And it's how do we get you to see that as well? Not get you, invite.
That's amazing. You are such an awesome human being.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm just craving a photo shoot now. I'm like, please,
right?
Picture.
Here.
So how does it? Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. You heard it here first. How does it work in the group? How do you notice the difference between, like, when you're photographing someone and it's really just you and them and helping them to come out, versus, like, how does that change in a group setting?
In a group setting, I really, that's been a process in itself. As a person who understands and feels energy, what I've really started doing with group spaces is also leading that in breath. So it's still closing down the eyes. I think more so when it comes to a group, I pose a little bit more and put people into a position. But then it's like, let's fall into that space as a group, and connectedness. Like, people are always touching in my photos. Not just because just as an artist, if you look at old paintings, they're somewhat in connection, but also when guiding people, I'm guiding a group through the breath and through touch. So it's like, how can we become one in this space? So it's still being guided. However, the posing is a little more on purpose, if you will.
Yeah.
And then it just forms into other things. So there's like guidance happening, but then once we start with like, okay, the uncomfortability of a camera's out and we're doing this in a group space and we might all be naked. That's, there's that awkwardness, but then we allow it to flow. So to answer your question, I think each group is different. But that would be the difference, is that there's more guiding in a way through posing versus one-on-one. We start more so in a natural state of just being. We're still doing it in a group space. It's just slightly different. And I think that's because, just because it's not something common to close your eyes in a group space and tune into each other's energy while you're being photographed. So it's just a different aspect. And so I think also for me, as like I said, as someone who reads energy, I really had to learn how to trust and allow flow. So I also opened the space for channel. So it's no longer just me behind a camera. It's the connection between the divine and what's wants to be flown through me. Not flown, but you know what I mean, channeled through. So each space is different. It's really about reading the space where we need to be and allowing spirit to flow through in that aspect of just being a conduit till it needs to be held in the space.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I can imagine that, just like you have to work through the issues you have internally with yourself, we also have, hesitation, apprehension to connect with each other, or just like you said, these moments of awkward, like, okay, I know you, but I don't know you that well. Or,
exactly.
We're about to go into something deep together. What does this mean? And what does it feel like? And can I be me? Can I let go? Do I need to hold some back?
Exactly.
Do you notice from any changes happening in the group dynamic from the beginning in the end?
The end. Yeah. Oftentimes I don't start doing photography like in a group space until we're in the middle of a retreat. So there is that, like, it's not as awkward as like, oh, I just met you. I got off a plane and now I'm in my underwear next to a tree in this space. Like we've had some ceremonies together. We've seen each other cry a little bit. We're in these spaces. But I have seen, I've seen it, especially in that group breath. It's in the exhale. There's a moment when everybody, after a few breaths, they sink. You can literally see them sink into the safetiness of, okay, this is my sister, and it's okay to be held in this space. Because that's another thing. Most women, we have those sister wounds that run deep within a lot of us, and we crave it. We crave that sisterhood, but to allow the full trust of, is this person, is it okay to be held by them? Is it okay to be seen by them? And I think it's that breath, that deep exhale, when as a group, they just sink into that space. And for a moment, it's like, okay, it's safe to be held here. And I can, And then after that, it definitely flows through. So there's some, just personally, I have many sisters that I know deeply just from meeting at retreats that know more about me probably than people I've known my whole life. It just happens that way, that it's, I don't know, sitting on the side of a volcano, bawling my eyes out. Those are the spaces where it really unfolds for people.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like, you get it. You understand.
Yeah.
Things that no one else.
Like, I see you.
Exactly.
And no one else is going to understand this situation at all, even when I go home. And that's part of that integration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what about you? Have you ever been photographed? Have you used this medicine on yourself?
I have. Yeah. I've actually in the beginning of photography, I was my own subject a lot for a lot of things. And then also at school, like I was the subject for people to photograph. I've done, I haven't photographed myself, but I've done these processes. And I knew you were going to ask me this. But but no, I haven't fully done it because I mean I could have my assistant do it, but I don't even know if it would be the same as me. But there's a way I could figure it out. But I have done a lot of self portraits and a lot of things within the somatics of creating imagery for that space of like truly like looking at self. And I've done it with my body as well, using different body parts to create imagery
That's
around
cool.
that, and like honoring and learning to love the temple, because that I mean I've had my own
Oh,
journey with that on my own, So
learning to love the temple. I love that.
I have that just came out.
That's nice. Learning
Yeah,
to love the temple. You should put that on your website
I'm
or
actually I was
something.
like I should write that down.
Yeah.
um yeah, because I mean to one of the things I tell my clients about is like, what's the part of your body that you're at war with most? And for me, for a long time, it was my thighs, because even when I've been at my lowest weight, I'm curvy. My thighs have touched my whole life, and it's been an issue up until probably like 6 years ago. And one day, I changed the thought around it. I said, okay, this is an issue, and I want to. What happens? I've got to learn to love this because this is not changing. So I changed the frame around it of that my thighs rub to my thighs love each other so much that they really like to make out. And then would say that like every day. And then it became, after like, that's part of the process of learning, like, hey, I'm with you. We're here. How are we going to witness this? How are we going to become in love with this? And it just became over time, like, it's not even a thought anymore. It's just like, it's my temple and we're going to honor it.
Yeah.
So with clients, I always say, okay, what part are you at war with? We're going to learn to love it. Let's figure out how. And I think that's where embodiment and photography comes into in this process. It's really learning to honor things you can't change. Or if you do change them, why are you changing them? Is it because you love yourself, or are you looking to fit into a box that someone's created for you? So, yeah.
Wow. This is really great, amazing, and necessary work that you're doing. And what I love most
Yeah.
about it is, I mean, obviously, the biggest powerful piece is learning to love yourself, learning to love all the aspects of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
loving the temple.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other piece is when you've come to that place where you really have embraced and loved every part of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
it's overflowing so much that you can freely give it to
Exactly.
everyone around you and make
Mm-hmm.
change in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's radical self-love, right? I think if we really get into what self-love is, um, there's that's idealized too. It's bath bombs, glitter, and getting your nails done and going out on a shopping day to get your favorite clothes. That's a small fraction of what self-love is. And radical self-love is really what you're describing is, okay, how can I set myself up so that even on the days where I'm at war, I can still honor the duality of who I am, that my shadows can be my shadows, and I don't have to like them, but I can learn to honor them. And if they are changeable, then how can we do that in a loving way? Which at the end of the day comes back down to acceptance of self, right? And learning radical self-love is that there's going to be shit days, and there's going to be days that I'm in the middle of a shit storm, but I still have to love myself through that. And it's okay to be flatlined on the ground in the middle of a I don't know, a dark night of the soul. But what are the things that I need to keep my life jackets that I need to keep me from actually hitting the bottom and staying down there? And those are it's coming back to that love for self. It can be hard to find for some,
Yes, difficult, but not impossible.
but not impossible. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. No, I don't want to ask that. Just like we're in a flow right now. We're in a vibe. Just we need to keep along. Yeah, I guess really I would say what message would you like to give to those who are going on a retreat to reconnect with themselves. Maybe they know why, maybe they have no idea why, they're just searching for something. How do you think photography or this soulography that you do could make a powerful impact in what they're seeking?
I I think it would be in vulnerability, in trusting in vulnerability. Vulnerability is a very scary place to be for most people, because what happens is our veils, our masks, everything that we've used to show our best self, invulnerability comes down, and it's just, here I am in the rawness, here I am in all that I am. And in the retreat space, what I have found is the more you dive into the vulnerability and the more you dive into fear around that, and the more you dive into trusting the process of whatever's happening, that on the other side of that, you're going to find exactly who you are, or find the journey to that. And it is in the vulnerability where you actually get to witness yourself and start to unravel things within yourself that will lead you to expansion on the other side of that vulnerability. And vulnerability, I think, for everyone can be many things. I mean, for some people, it could just be saying yes to the retreat and being so scared of, like, what am I doing? I don't know anyone. Versus like this, a soulography experience of, yeah, that scares me to be naked in front of a camera, or to even cry or explore. But what I have found is the greatest gifts and our truest light is on the other side of vulnerability, whether it's through the camera or through doing things that scare the shit out of you, and allowing people to see you and yourself.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like, when is the next retreat? Because I need to be on it.
I know, I got some coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, come.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Guatemala, right? That's the next one.
No, that I'm planning one in spring of next year that will be in Utah, in Zion, where we're combining sound and soulography in the caves.
Oh, that sounds really nice.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And that's in one of the four corners.
I keep getting, I didn't realize that until after I was like, hey, I kept getting the call. I'm like, I need to go there. And then I just, the other day, someone was like, that's one of the the spaces. And I was like, okay, that makes sense.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And then in the midst of planning Guatemala next year as well. And that will be in the fall, probably September.
Okay.
So
sounds good. I'll look out for those.
Okay.
Well, this has been whoa. This has been one of my favorite conversations on the channel. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about retreats, about soulography, or just in general?
I think I just, retreats have become a place where I crave them. I think once you go to one and you experience one that is life altering, it has the capacity to change your life. And I have found many people within the retreat space, for me, have become remarkable relationships within my life, that some of them I've still communicate with, but haven't seen them physically, who are on the other side of the world or in different countries, but those relationships have lasted very potently. That doesn't even make sense. Very
It does.
long. Great. Okay. Very potently. That's been my word today. But it's that, I think there's a freedom and liberation in the retreat space that I have not found to be the same in other places. You can do a day retreat, which is great, but it's that feeling when you're in there for 4 to 5 days, I think, with people that you've never met, who now are you just have this solidarity that's never going to be remade again, because it only exists in this capsule, of time. Because those women probably will never come back together, or the men that you're with, or the group of people that you're with in this moment. This is this is the thread that will exist in time at this moment only. Like, it will never happen again. So I think there's magic in that space. So I guess that's what I have to say on find a retreat and go.
Yeah,
And if you want to do soulography in a retreat, I'm game.